Hello internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be Whichwood by Tahereh Mafi. This is the second book in the Futhermore series. Now what you need to know before going into this book, it's not absolutely necessary that you're familiar with Futhermore for you to read and understand and enjoy this book, because even though the characters of Futhermore do make an appearance here and do play a very large role and would count as main characters in this, any references that we go back to Futhermore are kind of done in footnotes here. So even if you weren't really familiar with these characters, I think despite the fact that they do have their own book, that they have had their own story, even them being here is all handled by the way of footnotes and little clever ways of telling the story so that you're not lost even if you hadn't read Futhermore. Personally, I think you should probably read Futhermore. It just makes more sense for you to read the books in order, but if like you just are interested in only this book, I don't think your reading experience is going to be extremely hindered by you not being very familiar beforehand with Oliver and Alice. Now for this book again continues in the same vein of Futhermore, and instead we're visiting another place, a place called Whichwood, and in Whichwood the dead are taken care of in a special way by a special person, the Morshire or something like that. Anyway, they're taking care of a special body washer, and that is who our main character is. Her talent and her gift is to wash bodies and then release their souls properly. She can see ghosts. Her job is to wash and take care of the dead. It's what she has to do. It's like it's a must. And slowly the people of Whichwood start taking advantage of her because she has to do this for the dead. Not only is it a part of her talent, but it is also like her career path, her title. So this young 11-year-old girl, is she 11? Like this young girl, she's a preteen, is forced to wash tons and tons of bodies all by herself because she no longer has a family to help her, because she's had like she has a sad history with her father and her mother and everything like that. So she has to wash all of these bodies by herself. So Alice ends up getting a quest to go help somebody. As you remember in the first book, one of the goals that happened in the little town Alice came from is that all of those kids, when they become a certain age, they are given a task, and if they do that task and use their gift to help complete that task and help society, then they become adults of society and recognized members, right? It's like a little puberty mission or something. I don't know. It's a coming of age adulthood mission that you have to do. So Alice ends up going to Whichwood, and Oliver tags along, of course, because they're friends, and Alice made Oliver promise that if she went on her coming of age mission, then he had to come because of the whole experience with Futhermore and Alice helping him with his. Alice and Oliver show up, and they're supposed to help this girl here, Laylee, with her problem, which is washing all of these dead bodies that keep piling up and all of these spirits ronding around, and she's supposed to put them to rest. But like I said, there's a whole ritual and process that she has to do to use her gift so it can go through properly, and it's really taking a toll on her. For this book, I really liked it. I really loved the idea of Laylee's powers. I liked the sort of death culture aspect. I like how she perceived death, how the citizens perceived death, like what rituals she did to ensure that the dead were taken care of and laid to rest properly. And I really love those aspects, and I love those powers. I had a little bit of problems at the beginning with both Alice and Oliver because they come off as very rude, and at the beginning of the book I was really frustrated because I didn't know if their rudeness would be addressed, because sometimes, you know, in books a character will just be an asshole but no one will confront it, or like they're not going to learn that they were an asshole later. It's just going to be ignored and forgotten, and we're just going to pretend like that never happened and it was the other person's fault. So I was really angry at the beginning because I thought Alice and Oliver would get away with being rude to Laylee, and just like they break into her house and they start demanding everything from her, and they start being super rude, and when she like tries to ask for help, all they do is complain the whole entire time, and it's just really like they're really horrible guests to begin with, and I thought that would be something that would be excused. But it ended up being rectified, and Alice and Oliver ended up facing the consequences of their rudeness, and that ended up being tied together. So the one thing that really made me not like the book in the beginning was rectified towards the end, so it ended up being a non-issue for me, because it was like one of those things where I was more scared that that was something that wouldn't be addressed, and that is why I wasn't having a pleasant time. But since it was, I did, and it was fine. The one big issue that I did have with this story is that there is a narrator who is telling the story. It's like a storyteller. So there's a storyteller, and they're saying, hey, this is what happened to Laylee and Alice and Oliver. So it's this weird sort of third person where the storyteller somehow knows the minds of these characters, because the storyteller has been told the story and is like inferring stuff. And sometimes the storyteller injects their own little opinions instead of focusing just on the story. And while I really like that storytelling style in Futhermore, it got a little bit more irritating here, because I don't think me and the narrator are seeing the story in the same way. So the commentary that they were making on the characters' actions, like Laylee's actions or Oliver or Alice's actions, I got really irritated with, because I was like, why? Like, stop it, you're wrong. And like, that's a ridiculous thing to say, since I know the storyteller is Tahereh herself, and like, you know, so is the storyteller really wrong? Because I can only trust them to give me the story of like what this character was feeling and that. But like, it was one of these things where I was like, I don't know if you're interpreting this story the right way, because I'm definitely seeing something else. So like, there's this one big part where Laylee, like I said, she's being taken advantage of by the villagers, because they're supposed to take care of her. She takes care of the dead, and they pay her, and they're supposed to, like, you know, she's doing a job, you pay her for the job. But ever since her parents died, and it's just been her, they've just been like, we're gonna take advantage of you, and they've been tossing all these bodies on her, and she's obligated to clean them and do her job as the body washer. So she has to do it, but she is like surviving on breadcrumbs in an old house with, like, she's basically dying, and she's so stressed out and overworked, and there's no one to help her, and no one's willing to help her, and no one gives her any compassion or any food or anything like that. And there's a lot of parts where she's very rude and snipey and very closed off because of this treatment that she's had ever since she was a lot younger. Like, she's been doing this for like a year and a half, for a while now. And literally everyone has just abandoned her. And so because of that, she comes off as a really snarky and rude character. However, with her, despite her being like a jerk sometimes, it's understandable, right? I'm like, oh, okay, like, I get you. But there are some parts where the narrator is like, man, she's just, like, you know, there are some parts where the narrator was saying something about her and commenting something about how, like, she should feel guilty for, like, Oliver being rude to her and her being rude back. And I was like, no, girl, like, he was being rude first. Like, yes, you were bad, but like, it's not your fault. Like, these things are happening. So there was a lot of like self-blame for things that I didn't think that Laylee should be blaming herself for, and the narrator was kind of that same mind, as it's okay for Laylee to self-blame herself. And like, that's where I had a lot of disagreements. And like, that sounds really vague and really crazy, but like, if you've read this book, you probably understand what I'm going for. And if you haven't, and that's why you're watching this video, that's more of a personal me issue than I think something that would really bother anybody else. But I want to mention it because that does give what do you call it? It does give weight to my rating of like whether or not I liked it. Overall, I thought the book was good. It was enjoyable. Like I said, a lot of the talent stuff, the things that you learn about different people's talents in this book is really, really great, really, really interesting. Like, there's a kid you meet who can talk to bugs, so like, that's super interesting and cool. So there was a lot of cool and interesting stuff, but the biggest two problems that I had with it that really hindered my enjoyment at times was the narrator talking way too much instead of telling the story, and then the fact that at the beginning, Oliver and Alice are like the rudest guests that you could ever have, and I was like, I had to wait too long for them to be confronted and slapped on the wrist for being so rude. otherwise, I thought it was really good. I am interested to see if this series continues and where it goes from here, because there were definitely a lot of nice things going on. There was like hints of foreshadowing with romance and stuff going on here, which I didn't know how to take. Like, I wasn't bothered by it because I was like, oh, okay, like I could see those two together. But it was also like foreshadowing, like in the sense that the narrator, the storyteller, knew these people when they are older, and then knows that they're already together, like now in current times when they're telling the story, but they're rehashing the kids' past. So I'm like, so is there going to be like is this going to be a long series and we're going to watch these kids grow and eventually like them fall in love or something? Or is that just something you're telling me because you want me to know, yeah, that is the end game, they do get together 10 years from now? Like, I didn't know how to take that information. There was a few things like that where I was just like, okay. But otherwise, it was a really good story. I think the strongest point in this story is Laylee. She is definitely the strongest character. She's very, very complex, and I really like her. You really get a feel for her character, and I definitely really liked her powers and like how she worked them, and just like, despite how much her job sucked away from her, how dedicated she was to it, even though it's kind of been thrusted on her in a way that she wasn't expecting, even though she knew that she would eventually do this later in life, and how she takes it in stride, and just like the crazy things that happen towards the end due to her connection to the dead was really, really cool. It's like sort of gruesome, but also amazing. It was like great imagery, and I really, really liked it. So overall, I think Whichwood is a good book. I do think you probably should read Futhermore first. I think if you liked Futhermore, you're probably gonna like this book, but if you're kind of on the fence of Futhermore, you might be on the fence of this book as well. I think like the biggest drawback in this book is like a lot of people said they didn't really like Alice and Oliver when they read Futhermore. I'm not quite sure if they're going to get better for you in this book. Like I said, they're very rude in the beginning, and it's really frustrating to see. But Laylee makes up for it. I thought she was absolute bae. She was amazing. I loved her character. I loved her snark. She was really great. Like, you could clearly get a feel for her personality, the psychology behind the way that she acted and everything like that. And I think she more than made up for the lackingness of character that sometimes Oliver and Alice can have, and the rudeness that they can have in the beginning. They're sort of unlikable characters, and Laylee isn't like the best and kindest person, but I feel like she's a pretty likable character. Like, you can get behind her, where with Oliver and Alice, they kind of get irritating. So I don't know what to say for you guys who are like here because you read Futhermore, but you were unsure because you like, I don't really like Alice and Oliver. You might not like them here either, but at least there's Laylee, and then there's another character that is introduced as a kind of side main character as well. So like, there'll be other characters there to kind of bring you back in the story and get you through it, so you're not just focused on these two who can be complete rude asses. So like, that's it for this book opinion. If you've read this, can you tell me down below whether or not you liked it, and whether or not Alice and Oliver were a problem for you in the beginning, and whether or not you like them as characters? Because I feel like, yes, they're unlikable characters, but it's not because they're unlikable characters that I didn't like them, but because I just didn't like them, right? Because I like a lot of unlikable people in my books, but like with those two, in this book specifically, they just grated on my nerves towards the beginning. So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that, and if you've read this book and like what your opinion is on that yourself. If you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those bunnies down below, and goodbye, internet.